This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Welcome to Table Talk at the House of Bread. We're delighted that you've joined us this evening, and we're blessed to have a gifted, anointed servant of God, Madeleine Dean, our Congresswoman. And so before we begin this conversation, let's just have a word of prayer. Gracious and glorious God, we thank you for this night in which we are able to have conversation regarding the lives of your people. We pray, oh God, that this conversation will enlighten us, empower us, and we pray, oh God, that your people might be blessed. In the wonderful, glorious, mighty name of our God do we pray. Amen.
Amen.
We are delighted that you've come to share this time with us, and we have been following you as you have sought to be a voice for countless people in our state throughout the country. So can you tell us, in terms of your own perspective, what issues are really affecting us, not only in Pennsylvania, but across this country?
I'm delighted to be here with you, so thank you for inviting me to this conversation. I always feel welcome here, Pastor Quann. Your congregation and you always make me so welcome here at Bethlehem Baptist. There are so many issues that are impacting my district, our district. My district is Montgomery and Berks counties, so
is that the
fourth congressional district of Pennsylvania. I'm privileged to serve. I love the work that I do, but you know from your own work and your servant's heart, there are so many issues in front of us. I'll take them in no particular order, but I'll tick off a few that are really pressing right now. Number one, the protection of our right to vote is so important. You saw that the president was at the Constitution Center this past week, and he spoke about the moral imperative of protecting everyone's right to vote, that we have free and fair elections, as we did this past election cycle. But we know that there are those who would like to reduce the number of people voting, and we know that it is discriminatory. It's wrong on its face, but it's also intentionally discriminatory toward those who are poor, toward people of color, and toward, sadly, the elderly. Anytime you put in restrictions, you are restricting very often vulnerable populations from their important imperative of voting. Voting is important. COVID is obviously uppermost on all of our minds. I'm pleased to say we've made great progress. Here in Pennsylvania, we are well above the national average in vaccinations, and the number of infections is reducing, but our country lost more than 660,000 people to this pandemic. We never could have imagined it, frankly. We have to do more on COVID. Social justice, the cries, the renewed cries following the murder of George Floyd, incredibly important that we work on that. In Congress, you know, we passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. We passed it last Congress, and it's an expansive bill. It won't cure all ills, but it's an expansive, important bill. We've passed it again this Congress, and we are negotiating with the Senate to make sure that we make progress in terms of our social justice, reckoning with our criminal justice system, and systemic racism in policing. I've had the chance to talk with Karen Bass, who is our representative and lead negotiator on it, and she said to me, Mad, we know the grievous, heinous murder of George Floyd, but in the time since his murder, 200 more people have died in the hands of police, disproportionately people of color. We've got to make progress on that. Gun violence, addiction, making sure we restore our economy for all, not just for the few. Those are just a few of the most pressing issues right now.
One of the real heartbreaking issues is the number of crimes in our communities. Every day we read about another incident, someone has been shot, stabbed. We talk about the guns on our street. What legislation can help at this particular time?
Well, there are many pieces of legislation. No one will be the solution, but again, our bills have been stymied in the Senate. One thing that is incredibly effective are universal background checks. Right now in Pennsylvania, most of our gun sales are by way, you have to go through a background check to make sure you're not a prohibited purchaser. But we have a gaping loophole. And the loophole is that if you and I wanted to privately sell a gun, I'm not a licensed firearm dealer, nor are you, we could sell each other weapons, no background check required. We have a flood of illegal guns on our streets. So we have to make sure that every gun transfer goes through a legal background check so that later, if that gun is found at a place of a crime, we will be able to track it back and hold somebody accountable. We have to reduce the illegal guns on our streets. There are many other things we can and must do. I have a piece of legislation to update the Undetectable Firearms Act. We now know that a lot of firearms are coming into the market without an identification number. They can be made on a 3D printer. They are illegal, and yet they are lethal. So there's so much we have to do. And of course, a very important other side of that is identifying mental health issues and making sure we pour the resources into mental health. One of the saddest statistics about gun violence is more than half of the deaths are gun violence suicide. It's a staggering number. Thousands and tens of thousands of people a year take their own lives with a gun. We have to do better in terms of helping people through mental health crises.
You are to be commended for your advocacy for, particularly for those, not only in our state, but in our county. And even though Montgomery County is one of the richest counties in the state, we still have poverty.
Yeah.
So how are we dealing with the poverty and the disparity, particularly among African Americans and minorities, whether it's food or housing? How are we dealing with that?
I thank you for asking about that, and I know that's a passion of yours. And, you know, I was state representative before I came to Congress, so I served for 6.5 years. And you're right, it's surprising to learn that even here in Montgomery County, which is considered the third most affluent county in our Commonwealth, we have poverty, we have hunger, we have homelessness, we have real needs. More than 10% of people are hungry every single day right here in our county. I'm excited about a couple of things. Progress that we've made. Through the CARES Act, through the pandemic last year, and in a bipartisan way, I want to point out, we passed legislation, the American Families Act, CARES 1, CARES 2, a supplement to it. And every time we made sure that part of those resources would go to the neediest, the vulnerable. Really exciting is what happened in the American Rescue Plan, passed this year. Sadly, without Republican support. Still, important resources coming to our communities. July 15th marked an incredibly historic day, a day that families struggling through poverty or very low wages, they don't have to be no wages, low wage, middle class earners have an expanded child tax credit. And they saw it go into their bank account on July 15th. They'll see a monthly check to support their children. That's going to lift 40% of children out of poverty. In terms of hunger, there's dollars in the American Rescue Plan for nutrition, for food banks. It's ironic or paradoxical that here in Pennsylvania, one of the most agriculture-rich Commonwealth states in the country, we have people going hungry. And then on housing, I want to really call out Chairwoman Maxine Waters. It is her passion that we put it in the American Rescue Plan, dollars for housing, more dollars for senior housing, for subsidized housing, for affordable housing. So we took a really important step forward with the American Rescue Plan, and I hope those dollars are used wisely across the state of Pennsylvania, but right here, and we have more work to do. I won't say but, I'll say and we have more work to do in the upcoming packages that we're considering.
I want to ask you another question because we have followed your career. What drives you?
The chance to make a difference. It's so exciting every single day to think maybe I can make a difference to the good for somebody's life. Sometimes when I get discouraged, Pastor, I think, oh gosh, I'm beating my head against the wall. And then I'll call back to the district and I'll say, what constituent did we help? Who did we help today? And we might have helped somebody connect to food, to their Social Security benefits, to their veterans benefits, to housing. And then I think, it's all worth it. If I can make little differences, maybe they will add up to bigger differences for the good.
I just believe that Congress and the Senate have to change so that we would see a change in this country, because our country is so divided.
Yeah.
And whether you're a Democrat or Republican, there's got to be a way to find some common ground. Do you see in this administration common ground between Democrats and Republicans, whether it's on the local or national level?
We're really struggling. You know that. And following the events of January 6th, the divide physically on the floor of the House has widened. I'm not happy to report that to you. I'm struggling with it personally. How do I make and build relationships with people on the other side of the aisle in this incredibly polarized time? And I think the only answer is to tell the truth. And the more that we expose and tell the truth to the people we serve, it's our only path to bipartisanship. It's our only path to healing this country. We are at a precarious moment. Our democracy is precious and it's fragile. And we have to, as Barack Obama said at John Lewis's funeral, we have to tend to it. It's up to us to tend to it, to protect it. So I am hopeful for bipartisanship. That's why I celebrate the year of COVID, where we, in a bipartisan way, said we have to do this for all of our communities. But right now, I know we are in a difficult time. To your point at the local level, I think that's maybe where we have to make the difference, at the local level, so it will push up and demand of those at the state and federal level bipartisanship. I am sincerely worried about it, and I'm trying to find, and I ask for your counsel, how can I make sure that I'm reaching out? I literally reach out to members of the other side who saw things in the way I saw them in terms of the insurrection, and say, how can I work with you? Or somebody who has something in common with me, somebody who wants to work on the issue of addiction, because it's personal to me, and it's personal to our community. So I'm working with Republicans there. So it's a challenging time. I think the way to do it is with smaller issues that we can find in common. I don't know if you know it, but I'm the co-chair of the Bipartisan Women's Caucus. My Republican co-chair is Representative Jennifer Gonzalez-Colon. So we're finding smaller issues that we don't fight over, that we do have in common, to try to bridge some of the differences. But we're in a difficult patch. I don't know if you have ideas on how we pull ourselves closer together again.
So tell me also, in terms of how many women now are in Congress?
Oh, I should know that number. I don't know the number, but I think it's about, I'm going to say 25%, something like that. The year that I was elected, the Congress I was elected, saw the most number of women come into Congress ever, highest number. This past Congress, most of those were Democrats. This past Congress, more Republican women were elected, so we're getting there. But, and maybe that is really going to be part of the key to bipartisanship, getting a greater gender parity. The conversations change when women are included in the conversation, just like we need all diversity. But we've an increasing number of women and still not enough.
There was also speculation that you might run for Senate, and what changed your position there?
I really tried to discern the right answer, because it isn't often that an important seat like the seat that Senator Toomey will be leaving comes up. And really, in the end, you know what, Pastor? I thought about it. I thought, I love what I'm doing. I've had such good fortune to serve on the Financial Services Committee, to serve on the Judiciary Committee. I had the solemn honor to be asked by Speaker Pelosi to be one of 9 impeachment managers. I was elected vice chair of the Judiciary Committee and, the co-chair of the Bipartisan Women's. I thought, I'm able to fight for the issues I care about in this Congress. So one basic notion that I came to was, I love what I'm doing. Why would I leave it? The other is a Senate position is incredibly important. But there's something special about a House position, which is I get to feel like I know my constituents, and I think my constituents get to feel like they know me, because our districts are, one of 435. I have roughly 700,000+ people in my district. So I hope Montgomery County and Berks County identifies with me and thinks I'm their hometown congressperson. So it came down to I get to do worthwhile work that I love, and I get to be closely connected to people.
So with the proposed redistricting, are we going to lose any congressional seats?
Right now, we have 18 congressional seats across the state, 9 Democrats, 9 Republicans. So an even split, which really represents Pennsylvania fairly well. That's about the split of our voter registration. As a result of the census, and I think we'll learn the numbers very soon, we will lose 1 congressional seat. We'll go down to 17, which means each of us will get redistricted. I don't know what my district will look like. It goes through the legislature. It's a constitutional thing here in Pennsylvania. Goes through the legislature. Likely, there'll be some gerrymandering attempted, and then very likely it will wind up back in Pennsylvania Supreme Court. But each of us will have potentially a slightly different district, probably a slightly larger district, because we didn't lose population of an entire district. So we'll take one seat out, and everybody will get another 25,000 people or so.
How do we get the message out that every vote counts? Even in the primaries, the numbers were down. And how do we continually, given all of the, struggles between Democrats and Republicans, how do we encourage people that their vote counts?
I'd take a look at this past election cycle, and I'm really proud of Montgomery County and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We made the difference in the presidential election. He won by 80,000 votes. Pennsylvania produced that 80,000 vote difference. That's incredibly powerful. And it was an assessment, I think, by the voters, and you saw it was record number of turnout. Montgomery County, incredible turnout. You saw an assessment by the voters that they wanted their voices heard, and their vote was free and fair and protected, as you saw from all of the litigation that followed. We have to keep people engaged. I just saw some really interesting statistics about young people. Tufts University has a database about college campuses and young people voting. Young people voting is way up. I think that's the key to our success. Older people know their vote matters. We got to make sure younger people are educated, civically engaged, and making sure their vote is cast.
One of the real blessings that come out of this whole matter of our divided country is to see young people engaged, whether it's protests, marching, Black Lives Matter, people of all walks of life, and that really has been encouraging. On the other hand, I know that there are those who view the church and politics to be separate, but I just believe social justice is something that we all stand in need of, and the church cannot do it alone, nor can the political process do it alone. We all need each other, and our voices have to be raised. When we see something, we have to say something, and you have always been an advocate for the underprivileged, underserved. And so when we talk about that, we talk about women running for office, and we can't make any endorsements, but I'm praying for one of our servants named Val, and I'll leave it at that. But this whole matter of divisiveness has to end, and finding a way to bring healing to our country, and individuals like yourself. And I know that there are those who are pushing back on the investigation of January the 6th, but I think it's needed. And what is your perspective there?
I do think it's important, and I want to say that I have valued and watched your role in social justice issues. That's why I always feel welcome here and love to be able to be part of that together. And you know I'm a person of faith, and I think about Pope Francis and his focus on the poor, on the vulnerable, on those who are treated as the other. And so we all have a role to play there. In terms of January 6th, I think you know I was there. I was in the Capitol preparing for Pennsylvania's arguments. I was up in the the gallery observing the first set of challenges that were made on the floor when we were advised to please take our seats, and then to please lie down, and then please take out gas masks that were under our seats, which I didn't even know. And obviously all of the events unfolded and we were taken out to a safe room. I can't imagine anybody wanting to sweep that under the rug. I can't imagine anybody knowing that our very democracy was attacked. Sadly, Americans attacking Americans on not just any day in Washington, D.C., but a constitutionally important day presided over by our Vice President, Mike Pence, a joint session of Congress. It was an attack on our democracy, on the citadel of our democracy, and the saddest piece was it was an attack of Americans and on America. Sunlight's the greatest disinfectant. We gotta shine a light, get to the facts and circumstances, and find out what happened, for a single reason, frankly, that it never happened again. We know from the evidence that we've already seen that this was something brewed over time, sadly, through disinformation, through fear-mongering. That's what really upsets me, the attempt to just, instead of lifting people up in our public service, scare them, make them fearful for themselves and their families that somebody else might have some superiority over them. We have to face the reality of it. We have to face the elements of it that show that some folks are white supremacists, that they literally do not consider other people equal and are willing to obviously violate the law, but much more importantly, violate us and our democracy. So I am very much in favor. I wish we had had the independent commission. That would have been the way to go. Take it out of the hands of elected politicians and put it with an equal panel, equal subpoena power. And there's still a chance we could get that. But in the meantime, we have the select committee. It will move forward. We'll get the facts and circumstances again so that it never happens again.
One of the things that I would like to share with our congregation, as well as those who may be watching now, is this whole matter of relationships. And I think, again, as we sit across from each other at the table, the things we have in common. So you mentioned your woman of faith. So tell us about your faith, and then tell us about your family. I think that one of the things that we're missing sometimes in having these conversations is that we fail to realize that we have so many values that are similar. And even though we are in different professions, or even though we are different ethnicities, that there's a bond, that we have common values. So tell us about your faith and tell us about your family.
Thanks for asking. And you're right, that it is just a healthy reminder that, and I think this epidemic and pandemic has reminded us that we share a common humanity. That's the most important thing. So my faith, I'm a Catholic. I was raised a Catholic. My parents were people of faith and taught me the teachings of Jesus Christ. And so I love to read the gospel. I don't always agree with the administration of my religion, but I never lose my faith.
But they don't always agree with me either, so that's fine.
We're in similar boats. But I absolutely believe that the teachings of Jesus Christ are the path forward. That's the way to live life. Read the Beatitudes. That's the way to lead life. It's ambitious and aspirational. I don't always make it, but I try and try again. So, and the gift of my faith was renewed in me. My uncle, my late uncle, was an oblate of St. Francis de Sales, a Catholic priest, who lived with me in the final years of his life. So he really steeped in me the teachings of the gospel. He was just a great guy, very funny. So I have a gift of faith. My family, I'm blessed. My husband, PJ, my married name is Quann, as you know. PJ Quann, we're married 37 years. We met in politics, if you can imagine, when we were 18 and 19. And he's just a fantastic father, husband, extraordinary, successful businessman, hardworking. He's a man of just heart. He's just fabulous. We have 3 grown sons. My eldest son is married to Patrick, is married to Stephanie, and I just saw Ella, our 21-month-old granddaughter. The best part of life is the grandchildren.
Absolutely.
My middle son, Harry, has 3 children, a brand new baby girl, Scotty, who is 4 weeks old. So he has my 9-year-old Aubrey. He's married to Juliet. And he has Sawyer, who is 20 months old, and now a 1-month-old Scotty. And with Harry, I've been on an interesting journey. I think you know that Harry is now 8 years, 9 months, and some number of days in long-term recovery from opioid addiction. And so he and I had the challenge and the privilege of writing a book about that. We hope we can help others. We hope we can pull back the shame and stigma around the disease of addiction. He's doing extremely well, and now he's helping others. And then my 3rd son, Alex, is just, I call him a Renaissance guy. He's terrific. He's single, dating a very nice girl. He's a mechanical engineer, employed, and godfather to Sawyer, and he's just a wonderful, wonderful young man, lives in the area.
How do you balance all these things between wife, mother, grandmother, and servant of the people? How do you balance all that?
Not very well, Pastor. We've got balls in the air. Sometimes they drop. I would say the balls that have dropped the worst, and my kids would tell you this, housekeeping and cooking. But whenever I can, I take the time to be with my family. They have been so supportive of me in my wanting to be a public servant. They've helped me every step of the way. If I had wanted to run for Senate, they were with me, but they also helped me make the decision to run for re-election and continue to serve where I am. So I just recognize my blessings, but I don't do it very perfectly.
Just join the team. If my wife was here, she'd probably say similar things, but she's not here, so I won't give her a chance to speak. But let me also move in another direction, because I'm concerned about particularly the number of people who are not getting vaccinated. Yeah. What is your thought there?
Oh, it's troubling. It really is troubling. And I'll take it back to truth. Let's think about what happened. We had a pandemic like we had not seen, obviously, in this country for more than 100 years. And we have to give credit where credit is due. Based on science, we were able to develop multiple vaccines that have a very high efficacy rate. But they were up against a headwind. And so I give the previous administration credit for that work. I give the current administration credit for moving us toward getting these vaccines out. But the whole notion was up against a headwind, sadly, of disinformation. So some people came to not trust it, not trust scientific leaders, not trust political leaders. And so I think that part is extremely sad. I remember when the vaccine was announced, talking with different faith leaders and saying this is going to be all of us. Important influencers have to talk to people and make sure they know the truth, and that by getting a vaccine, they're not only protecting themselves, they're protecting their family members, their co-workers. This is our only path forward. So when I hear of folks, sadly, choosing not to become vaccinated or not to have their loved one vaccinated, I hope they'll rethink it. I hope they'll pray on it, frankly. You've seen cases where people are coming out and advocating because their family member didn't trust the vaccine, didn't get the vaccine, and died of it, died of COVID. We have to use every influencer we can to lift up the whole community to make sure nobody is at risk. The vaccine isn't perfect. It's not going to say you will not get COVID, but we know it's effective in keeping the symptoms reduced and keeping people alive.
There's been some conversation around making it mandatory. How do you feel about that?
I haven't come up with a decision on that, to be really honest. You know, you think about the vaccinations that we require of our school children. We've gotten to a point where we do know that in terms of protecting public health, there are certain levels of immunization that are required, whether it's smallpox or any of the other maladies that we have been able to develop vaccines around. So I haven't come up with a decision on this. I really need to be guided more by the science. In the meantime, I hope everybody, I think family members are going to be some of the greatest influencers, co-workers. I remember early on in the vaccine process, a friend of mine was like, no, I'm not getting the vaccine. No, I don't trust it. But as everyone around him got the vaccine, I saw him a little bit later, he said, oh yeah, I got it too. But it was the influencers around him who said, look, it's safe. It is an important level of protection for yourself and your family. And he got it. So we have to just keep building on that.
One of the rich experiences in this community has been the faith community. And you've been to several of our Martin Luther King services, and we have a wonderful relationship with Beth Orr as well as St. Anthony's, Maxine McHenry, and individuals who really are working towards social justice. And I've been privileged to be a trustee at Abington Hospital and found out maybe about a year or two ago that Lansdale Hospital, which is now Jefferson, Abington, and Lansdale, was founded by an African-American, Dr. Frank Boston. Have you heard anything about how we're moving in that direction? And I know that on August the 30th, there's going to be a dedication honoring the life of Dr. Frank Boston, and I think it's remarkable that that has been revealed. A number of persons had no knowledge about the fact that African American established that hospital, and there are now efforts to bring even Congress aware of that. So have you heard anything about Dr. Frank Boston?
Absolutely. We're really excited. I was excited to learn it. I didn't know it either, and I'm from Montgomery County my entire life. The contribution of Dr. Boston, and that it wasn't known. That's what I think these last few months have really reminded us. There's an awful lot of our own history we do not know. And so the contributions of Dr. Boston, I think he was World War I doctor, veteran, just extraordinary. So we're participating in that, excited to be a part of it, and exciting to lift up that story. Our roots right here in Montgomery County and in Berks County, there's a tremendous amount of leadership of great diversity. But it is interesting that that story has been so quiet for so long.
And they're going to name the lobby in honor of Dr. Frank Boston and reveal a portrait. And it is heartwarming to know that no matter how secretive Ben is now becoming light, and we all can rejoice on that.
Absolutely.
Also thinking again about how we continue to build bridges, and that's something we're talking about in our faith community, in our political process, how we build bridges that bring people together as opposed to being separated. And so when you think about opportunities to build bridges, what is your thought there?
I do look for opportunities, whether it's just a single relationship. And I always think of, what we see an awful lot right now is fear and hatred, which is so troubling and so discouraging. And I'm hoping that Martin Luther King's words win out, which is, I prefer love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. I'm hoping, sadly, I think we're seeing that great burden of hate and what it is doing to people, literally to the people who bear the hate and then share that hate. It's too great a burden. So I hope that the building of bridges, and it's a challenge because human nature makes me mad at somebody who does those things, but I've got to constantly train myself to say, try to see that person with whom I don't agree with love. Try to understand them. Try to figure out, what motivates them. My mother used to say, you're not in my moccasins. You're not in his moccasins. Let's find out. Try to put ourselves in that person's moccasins. Deal with them with compassion and love. As I said, I'm not good at this entirely, but I try. But I think that's the only way forward. I'm hoping the vitriol we're hearing now is in a death spiral. I hope people will see that, we reap what we sow. If we sow hatred, if we sow bigotry, if we sow hatred, what do we think we're going to get out of it? What are our kids going to get out of it? It's, and maybe one of the top issues that we haven't talked directly about is education. We have to educate our young people about the Dr. Bostons, about the contributions of church leaders, civic leaders, business leaders of every stripe. I guess it's about educating our kids.
Educating also the general public. so many things are taking place. I just see now they passed where they're going to merge some of our colleges, Pennsylvania, California University in Bloomsburg, where my son went. So many challenges, but that drives me to the next question. What about our economy? So I walk throughout our community, I see so many of our small businesses are closed. Is there any light at the end of the tunnel in terms of, can we get back, I won't say to normalcy, but can we see businesses thriving once again, particularly smaller businesses?
I'm really optimistic on that, but I'm worried. I want, like you maybe, I don't want to go back to normal. I don't want to go back to where we were. I want to go back to something better. I want to make sure that this recovery is even, that it lifts all of us, not just the few, not just the white, not just the bigger business. And so there are really good signs. As you know, I served in the Pennsylvania House. I served on appropriations. Every budget season we struggled with a budget deficit, and we'd try to borrow from this and take from that and all of that. This year, shockingly, following the pandemic, Pennsylvania had a $3 billion budget surplus. And the federal government, through all those CARES Acts and the American Rescue Plan, sent nearly $8 billion to Pennsylvania. The challenge now is to make sure Pennsylvania uses it with equity and with wisdom and with the spirit with which it was passed, so that the small businesses, and I'm very proud of the Fed and the SBA, and of course the bills that we passed, that tried to sustain businesses through the PPP loans and the EIDL grants and those kinds of things. We were able to stave off a complete depression. And the economy is coming back strong. But the Fed chairman, Powell, was in front of us this week in the financial services, and he acknowledges that the recovery is strong and it is uneven. And so we have to do more. My district is strange. By measures of the SBA, we have the greatest number of small businesses of any congressional district in the entire country. And so we're in touch with small businesses every single day. You're right, a number of them are shuttered, but I think many of them will come back, and will come back different, I think informed by what we just learned through this pandemic about how interconnected we are, how dependent we are upon one another. And we're going to continue to work to make sure it is also minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and the legislation reflected that, that we passed. There is an urgency around minority and women-owned businesses to get them resources. Again, not perfect, but I think the economy is looking good. Again, I'll go back to the expanded child tax credit. That's a game changer. We will lift, in my district alone, 40% of children out of poverty. It's incredible. We have to do that again. It can't be 1 year and then you let everybody go back. We have to do that, and then we got to figure out how to get the other 60%. But the dollars that we have pumped into this economy, and by way of, I think, very good work with private institutions, with the SBA, and with the Fed in partnership, kept us out of a depression, frankly, and are now, we're seeing the fruits of that. We were warned early on by top economists, came into caucus, and then caucus, of course, went to all Zoom, that the danger will be that government, Congress, does too little and does it too late. They said, the danger is not you do too much and you do it quickly. And so I hope people see that we tried to do it as quickly as we could, mostly in a bipartisan way, to get dollars out. And there you see in Pennsylvania a budget surplus following a pandemic. I'm actually shocked by it, but we got to make sure it becomes even.
What about our postal system?
I value our postal system. It predates our Constitution. It's so important. It is embedded in our Constitution. It's so important, and it was politicized and under-resourced, which was really shocking, especially when you consider we were going through a pandemic, an important national election. And these folks are public servants. So I've met with letter carriers, different people in the administration of the Postal Service. We haven't resourced them enough. They're overburdened. You see the mail, I imagine your congregation talks about it. The mail is patchy, delayed, but they are overwhelmed. They are swamped as a result of whether it was the election cycle with all the mail-in ballots, but much more the delivery of packages and goods, medicines. And so what we believe is we have to fund them more. So in the American Rescue Plan, we got more dollars to the Postal Service, but they also have to be fairly administered. And they have to be respected. They're working overtime. They're not able to dig out from the mounds and mounds of packages and mail that needs to be delivered. So we have to do more to resource them more.
I really want to thank you. You are really touching on some very sensitive issues, important issues, but also want to ask you in terms of some of the comments and questions around why there's so many people who are in business who are looking for people to work. Is it a result of people getting the stimulus that they don't want to work? You hear that comment all the time. Almost every place I go, whether it's a restaurant, whether it doesn't matter where it is, hiring, hiring, hiring. So what is, in your mind, the reason why so many businesses are still trying to get people to work?
I think it's not one thing. And that was something we had the chance to talk with the Fed chairman about, and I've been reading about, because small businesses are coming to me and saying, you've given too much stimulus. People are staying home. They're not coming back to work. I don't believe that. What the statistics actually are beginning to show is that people are looking for different work. They're looking for higher paid wages. So the workforce right now has the ability to demand more, to get to higher wages. I don't think that's a bad thing. The other thing that I think about is, and I'm seeing the same signs, servers needed. I think that is temporary. I think this workforce will even out. You saw the addition of 850,000 jobs in June. Surprised everybody. Everybody thought it would be a little more anemic. So I think that is a temporary problem or gap. And then with the additional unemployment compensation at the federal level, that will come to an end. And folks who are offered their jobs back by law have to take those jobs back. But I do think it's a number of factors, and the Fed chairman said as much. He said the problem isn't that you offered the stimulus, you offered the extended unemployment compensation at the federal level to enhance the state level. It is that people are looking at employment differently. They're looking for other opportunities. That's why I'm excited about the American Jobs Plan. In there will be technical training. In there will be free community college, free tuition for HBCUs to educate and train our population so that we are the most effective workers that we can be. That might be one of the greatest outcomes from this disastrous year and a half. So it's not one thing. The other thing I think when people say that to me, like, oh, you just put too much money out there, everybody's going to stay home. The resources we've sent have also increased demand on our small businesses. People are shopping again, they're buying again, they're going to restaurants again. So it is as a part of that investment in people, in their pocketbooks, as they struggled through unemployment, that they're now able to come back and invest back into the economy. I think that's why we're seeing some of this surplus. So I think it's temporary, but I think it is a realignment of our workforce.
So in a few days, you're going to go back into session. How do you go back?
You mean physically or mentally?
Mentally.
Mentally, I'm fired up. I'm so eager to get back, to be honest. We've been home for 2 weeks doing district work, which has been great, and I've been able to go out to different projects. I was out with you, talking to folks in some of our housing, and learning from them. As you said, we listen and we learn. I love being in the district, but I'm eager to go back because what we have coming up are a set of bills. This is budget season for us, so we have appropriations bills, community project funding bills that are coming across this coming week. I hope H.R. 1, because of what the Supreme Court just did again in terms of hurting our voting rights. We need to do something to protect those. And then, of course, the American Jobs Plan, infrastructure. If that, you saw a $3.5 billion negotiated agreement in the Budget Committee of the Senate. If we can bring that across, that will be an incredible transformational investment. And we talked about children, grandchildren. For me, that's so exciting, to go back and be able to have the chance to vote yes, to invest in my grandchildren and their children. That's what it's all about. I really look forward to that. So I'm eager to get back there. I usually take Amtrak, to answer your question. This week I think I'm actually driving because I have some needs to move around down there. But I'm really excited about that for a bigger reason, not just to get this bill passed this year, but I think about how our parents' generation gave us important investments, whether it was years ago, the railroad, Eisenhower administration, highway system. We owe it to the next generation to come up with innovative, protecting of the planet, investment in our capital infrastructure, in our people infrastructure, in our communities. And if we do that with equity and lifting up the vulnerable, that's a transformational investment that I'd love to be a part of.
You have hit on so many important subjects, and as time winds down, I am just grateful. And the more you talk, the more I get fired up in terms of even the public transportation system, in terms of, Leslie Richards is now leading that initiative, and this whole matter of transportation sector is really another issue on the table.
Yeah.
As well as the fact that the other issue on the table is in terms of how we deal with this whole matter of trying to get back to a degree, and I like what you said, not normalcy, but going even further than that,
yeah,
in terms of how we do that, and our willingness to acknowledge that there's some things that have to be changed.
Yeah.
And to have the spirit and the courage to change some things. And a lot of things, as you mentioned, whether it's the political system or the post office system, things have to change.
Yeah.
And change sometimes takes a long time, but we need change. And you're an advocate for change?
I am, and I'm an advocate for change through education. And I'm going to say this about myself personally. You talked about Black Lives Matter, and I remember feeling a slight reluctance to be a part of a march, thinking maybe it wasn't my place. And then I got to the march and I said, of course it's my place. This isn't a black person's problem. This is all of our problem. So it is about self-education. I think about, people talk about the filibuster and what a block it has been to good legislation and to legislating, frankly. I learned from Representative Clyburn, our whip, he's a history buff and a former history teacher, that the roots of this procedure, this technique that is used to block legislation, were in Jim Crow South. And so I had to educate myself to understand why we must change that. It literally stands in the way of legislation to move forward. So I'm an advocate for change. Sometimes it's personally within me by learning, and of course in the greater good. With the filibuster, in terms of George Floyd, justice and policing, one of the things I learned as I read about it was, do you know that the first time that an anti-lynching bill came up in Congress was in 1918, and it was in the 1920s that it was defeated by the filibuster. The filibuster was used to block lynching, anti-lynching. We haven't passed an anti-lynching bill 100 years later. It's in George Floyd, Justice and Policing. That would be made a federal crime. But we have to learn what has happened in our history, in our legislating, to block change. And we have to do whatever we can to get rid of those things.
Well, again, let me thank you so much for sharing your heart and the things that you are committed to help bring about change. I'm privileged to serve on the Housing Authority, and I do believe that there has been in my own estimation, a denial of the fact that people can't get the housing, even in Montgomery County, with the number of vouchers that are available.
Yeah.
And so we talk about housing is a key to one's whole life, and yet people have waited years to even get a voucher. And that has to change, and
Yeah.
affordable housing in Montgomery County and all those other concerns. And no one person can do it, but together, hopefully, our voices can be raised in support of you when you go to speak about legislation, that you're not there with a single voice, you're there with the voice of the people.
Thank
And
you.
so we support you in that regard, and just grateful for your heart. And I'm sure that there are countless people who are delighted that you're now representing them in the 4th District, and so are we.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much for your
Thank you.
willingness to help people and to make a difference in this country and in the world. So we want to thank our viewers this evening for sharing with us. And if you have not had an opportunity to tell someone that every Thursday evening at 7 o'clock, Bethlehem Baptist Church is providing opportunity to hear from some of our leaders socially, economically, religiously, politically. We want to be engaged in the whole community. God calls us to be engaged about the whole person. So thank you so much for sharing this evening with us, and look forward to seeing you next Thursday at 7 o'clock here, Bethlehem Baptist Church, Table Talk at the House of Bread. Have a great evening.